Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the Centura Health Training Center for another episode of Broncos Now. As always, I'm your host, Sydney Jones. And coming up on today's episode, the team held their first padded practice of training camp. So we'll hear from head coach Sean Payton, cornerback Pat Surtain, and inside linebacker Josie Jewell. All that and more coming up. Monday was the Broncos' fifth training camp practice, and unfortunately, the top news of the day is injury-related. Wide receiver Tim Patrick was carted off during practice. Head coach Sean Payton discussed what happened and believes it to be his left Achilles.
I was watching it directly because he was running around, and it was something we had corrected earlier. It was kind of on air. He planted. I thought it looked like he slipped, but we're evaluating his left Achilles. That's what we think the injury is. We haven't confirmed it until he gets the MRI, but it wasn't any contact. It was just kind of coming out of a cut. His injury last year was on his right knee, so I think the natural question right away by all of us was, is it the same leg? But we'll wait till we get an MRI.
A torn Achilles is typically a season-ending injury. Cornerback Pat Surtain and inside linebacker Josie Jewell spoke today on what losing Tim would mean for this team.
It's a tough break for us as a team. Obviously, when you see something like that, we're such a great player. I'm a great leader at that. When you see him go down like that, it sucks in a way, you know what I mean? But I'm wishing him the best and, just going from there.
That's tough, a guy that's worked so hard to come back to where he is. But don't know what's happened yet. Hopefully it's something small. Hopefully he'll return really quick. But, yeah, never fun to see anybody go down, especially a guy that, works hard and just got hurt last year. So
Monday's practice was the team's first padded practice. And for the defense, today's a day they've been looking forward to.
Real football doesn't start until them pads come on. So, everybody was amped up. Everybody was excited, about the first day of pads. Just sort of getting our field acclimated, making sure them pads, click and clack, all that. So it was good having the first day of pads out there, just competing.
Just another step up. We were going pretty hard even with the little shells on underneath, but just ramp it up even a little more, can hit the line a little more. And just go play aggressive ball.
The team had some physical team periods today, and head coach Sean Payton talked about live periods and what his philosophy is when it comes to those.
When we get to goal line or short yardage, we might have 6-8 plays live. We're in full pads now, so it's full go up. We're not cutting, we're not tackling to the ground. So we have to learn to practice together this way, and I thought today they did a good job of it. They handled it well.
Now joining me here inside the Broncos podcast studio is Broncos lead writer Eric Dalala. Eric, some unfortunate news coming out of practice today. We heard from head coach Sean Payton earlier discussing, Tim Patrick's potential Achilles injury. Really awful. Terrible to see him go down, and especially given the year that Tim Patrick had and how much he, worked so hard to get back on the field from his ACL injury.
Yeah, no kidding, Sid. I mean, we all love this sport. This is one of the worst parts of it, right? You see a guy in Tim Patrick that worked so hard to get back from a torn ACL that happened nearly a year ago to the day. I believe it was August 2nd that he tore his ACL last year in training camp. I believe that was one of the first days in pads. Today, first day in pads for the Broncos, and this happens. Just really unfortunate to see, and it looked routine. He's coming out of the backfield, as Sean Payton said. Kind of just wasn't even a hard cut necessarily, just turning upfield, loses his footing. And they fear, at the time we're recording this, nothing official yet from the team, but they fear that it's potentially a torn Achilles. They're looking into that. Obviously, it's a serious injury, and it's twofold here, right? One is just what Tim has gone through, and his path back. You hate to see that for a guy who stood up there in front of the media and said, "Listen, it takes a lot of people 2 years to get back. I plan on being my best self this year," and certainly with how hard he works, you wouldn't put that past him. So that's one element of it. And then just the team, again, loses a big contributor, a guy who last year at the end of the year, everyone looked back and said, you know what, it hurt us a lot more than I think we thought when we lost Tim Patrick. He was the emotional heartbeat of this team.
Big leader on the team.
And now you've potentially lost him again. And so for a team that, all of a sudden said we've been waiting to see Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick all out there together. It's rarely happened, and now again, it's looking like that's not going to happen. So a tough blow both for Tim and for this football team.
For sure. And Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe a torn Achilles is typically a season-ending injury.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long-term deal, and you just feel for him that he's finally finished this rehab process, and boom, you might have to start it all over. And so, our thoughts out to Tim.
Definitely.
If anybody can come back from it, we heard some guys say that it's him. He's got that mindset. He's always had that chip on his shoulder, but listen, he's going to need it. It's hard to come back from a season-ending injury, and then whatever this turns out to be, that's not going to be easy for him to make it back. But we're hoping that he does.
Yep, wishing for a speedy recovery for him. In other news, Eric, KJ Hamler, he was also waived today. His was a non-football illness designation, and KJ did post on Instagram saying that he was diagnosed with a mild heart irritation.
Yeah, we knew that KJ Hamler was coming back, obviously from some injuries, but we thought he'd participated in the offseason program, thought he was going to be ready to go. He was on NFI when training camp started, and you kind of wondered why he wasn't out there. This answers some of those questions, right?
Yeah.
And he noted in his post on Instagram that he was taking medication to treat this.
Right.
He's hoping that he's going to be back sooner rather than later playing football, but he is taking a break right now to focus on getting healthy, which is obviously the most important thing for him. He's got to be healthy. We've seen you don't want to mess around with a heart condition. And so for KJ, one, focus on being healthy, and then try to get back out there on the field, because Sid, just as it's been for Tim, it's been a tough go
It's been hard for KJ.
Hamler. We've seen his potential, but he dealt with a serious injury last year. Before that, he obviously came back from a serious knee injury, and he just has unfortunately had a hard time staying on the field since he was drafted back in the second round way back in 2020. So with KJ, you hope he gets another opportunity, whether it's here in Denver or somewhere else. But he's been through adversity, so that's one thing that you can. He's been through it before, so you hope that he's able to take some of those strategies. It was a difficult process for him last time. Hopefully this is not as long-term of a deal. Hopefully he's able to get back out there.
Right.
Listen, Sid, we know what kind of difference he can make when he's healthy. We haven't seen it, unfortunately, enough. But again, like I said with Tim Patrick, the Broncos will miss not having Hamler out there if he ends up not being a part of this roster. And it's a little different with KJ, right? Because he hadn't been out there. You weren't sure exactly what you were going to get. Whereas with Tim, you kind of expected this starting type guy.
Yep.
But still, it tests the depth in that wide receiver room. And you go from saying, okay, it's Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, maybe KJ Hamler if he's healthy, to now saying, okay, well, it's Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, and now we need a lot from Marvin Mims, or Marquez Callaway needs to step up, or Greg Dulcich may need to take on a bigger receiving role, and kind of go on the list. Does Brandon Johnson get a shot? Does little Jordan Humphrey, Jalen Virgil? I mean, you now talk about some guys that they're going to have to step up, and unfortunately, we had this conversation early in training camp last year of who's going to step up, having the same conversation again. But if I do have one kind of silver lining here, it's that we know Sean Payton knows how to get the best out of these guys. And so you've got a coaching staff that no matter who is out there is going to put them in position to succeed. But no doubt about it, it hurts losing a KJ and a Tim Patrick.
Yep, definitely a tough day for the receivers. Wishing KJ the best moving forward. Definitely, Eric. In terms of practice today, it was the first padded practice of training camp. So overall, what'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, the defense has gotten the best of the offense a couple days here. I thought that was probably the case overall. Again, the defense loves when you put the pads on. They can be a little bit physical. We saw some guys get some good rushes. Jonathan Cooper rush stood out to me at one point. I would say that the pass protection in general was pretty good. And there were times when in the run game, the Broncos sealed things off and had some positive plays. Jaleel McLaughlin, an undrafted rookie, he stood out a little bit. Sean Payton talked about him and how he's one of the hardest workers on this team. He's got speed. He's got a little bit of toughness to him. He said he's in here at 5 a.m. every morning, which stands out. But yeah, I mean, last year the offensive line, I think, struggled in general. And so to see those flashes early is a good sign. It's going to take some time for this offense. That's what tends to happen in training camp. The first week, the defense is a little bit further ahead. The offense takes some time. But nice to see the physicality out there. I mean, Asang Bassi had one play said where, I think it was Montreal Washington caught the pass and Asang Bassi was there and hit him right away.
Right.
And it was a physical play. Sean Payton, they didn't really go live on Monday, but Sean Payton talked about how at some points they will. So that philosophy of hitting hard but keeping guys safe is important, and we saw the start of that on Monday.
Yep. Eric, another person that Sean Payton talked about was wide receiver Marvin Mims. He returned to practice today, and he sounds very encouraged about him.
Yeah, obviously he'd been dealing with a little bit of an injury.
Yeah.
It sounded like a hamstring from what Sean Payton had said. He did some more on Monday, got out there. I think was involved in some team reps. So we'll see that continue to increase over this coming week, according to Sean Payton. He's a guy with speed. We know that. Good hands. And he's going to be called on to be involved in this offense. And Sean Payton talked a little bit about, sometimes rookies are able to take on a lot, sometimes they're not. Broncos are probably hoping that Marvin Mims can share some of this workload, can make a difference. He doesn't need to go out there and be the number one receiver, obviously,
Right.
but if he can be a threat or even be a third option, that's going to help the Broncos, especially now that Tim could potentially be done for the year.
For sure. Eric, we haven't really talked about a lot of the rookies yet so far in training camp. So is there anyone else that's kind of stood out to you?
Oh, man. JL Skinner, fields are kind of divided between the first team and sometimes like some of the second team guys and everybody else.
Right.
Skinner hasn't necessarily cracked that starting group yet, but he's a physical guy. He's huge. You
He's
look
really
at him
big.
and he's just really tall.
He's so tall.
Flies around. He had a play the other day before pads were on where I think there was a little swing pass to the running back, and he was up there in a flash. And so we'll see what happens as these practices go on. You've got to put pads on for the second, third, fourth day in a row.
Right.
It wears a little on you, but he's a guy that I've certainly got my eye on, and I'm interested to see. And I thought Drew Sanders too. He's starting to show a little bit of his athleticism there in the middle of the defense, covering tight ends, that sort of thing. A lot of these guys have dealt with some sort of injury that's hindered them a little bit here or there, but seems like, knock on wood, that these guys are starting to get out there and make an impact.
Well, Eric, second week of training camp. There's still a lot more practices to go.
That's right. A lot more to learn.
Yep. We'll be right back here tomorrow for some more as well.
See you then.
Eric, appreciate you joining the show. Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Broncos Now. Broncos Country, thanks so much for tuning in. I'll meet you right back here on the Broncos Podcast Network and YouTube tomorrow for another episode. I'll see you all then.